All righty. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started pretty soon with our webinar here today, which is going to be full site editing, sneak peek full site editing, to give you the full title. I'm going to go ahead and just give everyone a few minutes here to file into the room. We have just a small number of people here today, just about 600. So we could start anytime, but I'm going to go ahead and wait a little bit before we get underway so everyone has a chance to attend. In the meantime, let me introduce myself. I'm Jerry, and I'm a happiness engineer living near Seattle, Washington. I see a lot of you are coming from just all over the world. I have been watching the chat, and I honestly can't keep up because it's going so fast. But I see we've got a lot of folks here from the US, a lot of folks from Mexico. Africa is very well represented today, which is awesome. We have quite a few happiness engineers and other automaticians who work for WordPress.com who are from Africa as well. Spain, Denmark, these are all places I'd really love to go. I can't wait till it's a little easier to move around the world. Also, special credit for anyone who is in the Pacific Northwest with me right now, where it is second winter and kind of rainy outside right now. And I don't know about you, but I'm ready for spring to start. So let's have a hooray for that, huh? Anyway, as I wanted to say, I'm a happiness engineer, and in my day-to-day, I help folks with their sites, with their questions they have here on WordPress.com. But I also really enjoy conducting these webinars, so I'm really glad you could all join us here today. I also have a couple folks here who are going to be helping me in text, so if you have a Q&A question and you get a text answer for that, that's going to be from either Tanya or Shane, who are here helping me out today. One more thing I want to mention briefly before we get started is that this webinar, it applies specifically to sites that are hosted on our WordPress.com managed hosting service. And I know that some of you are probably coming to this session with a WordPress site that you have with another hosting provider like GoDaddy or Bluehost or HostGator, or really any standard hosting provider. They also offer the ability to install WordPress on their platform as well. Everything you see here in this demo is going to apply to your self-hosted WordPress site. So it doesn't have to be a WordPress.com site. Most of the things you see here are going to apply. To give you a little idea on WordPress.com, we pre-install a lot of things on our sites that if you have a self-hosted site, you would typically add via plugins. So some of the things that you see, there's going to be some slight differences just in the interface that we show. Our dashboard looks a little different. It's a little bit more like a web app. So it doesn't require page refreshes, but it just sort of refreshes on your screen and just works a little bit faster and a little bit smoother. And there's a few other things that we pre-install as well. And if you would like to have those on your site, you absolutely can. All you need to do is install the Jetpack plugin, which is available at jetpack.com. And this is basically a plugin that we offer that takes all of the cloud-hosted services that we pre-install on WordPress.com and allows you to install those on your site as well. So we have a stats package, contact forms, security protection, backup plans are available, although that's an upgraded option. The interface that you see in this webinar is also provided via Jetpack as well. So if you like what you see or you notice there's something different about my screen, it's probably related to that. And so you can install the Jetpack plugin on your site at jetpack.com. It's a free plugin, and that would give you the same basic functionality you're going to see in this webinar. But because we focus on full site editing, or FSE as we sometimes call it for short, that system is actually very similar between WordPress.com and WordPress.org, or self-hosted WordPress, or any other names that platform goes by. So don't worry about that. Most everything you see today is really going to apply to your site as well. And also in our Q&A, feel free to clarify if you have a site hosted with another provider. That doesn't typically change the way that we answer our questions, but it's helpful to know, and it allows us to sort of maybe shape our response a bit to make sure that it applies to you and not to someone specific on a WordPress.com. Let me see. The only other thing I want to mention here is that we have a chat and Q&A available for this Zoom call. Chat is really more just for chat, just kind of like it sounds. It's great to see where you're coming from. I love actually seeing all the places everyone's attending from today. Also, if there's any technical issues, if you're having a problem with audio or video or something like that, you can go ahead and give us a shout out in the chat and we'll see that right away. However, if you have a question about your site and you'd like to get that answered, or a question about something you see in the webinar, I'd like you to ask that in the Q&A panel. And you can see here on my screen share, In Zoom, the Q&A option is just down at the very bottom of your Zoom interface. And you can click on that, and that'll add your question into our Q&A list. And specifically, when we get underway with the webinar, I'm not really looking too much at the chat. It's a little hard for me to focus on that while I'm presenting, but I do pay attention to the Q&A. So if you happen to have a question, be sure to drop it in Q&A and not in chat. Chat today is really busy, so it's a good chance that we might miss your question. So Q&A is definitely your best place to go with that. Let me see here. I think that pretty much takes care of the housekeeping that I have for right now. So let's go ahead and get started with our presentation here. Again, thank you all for attending Sneak Peek Full Site Editing. And I'm sure you're here because you're asking yourself, what exactly is full site editing? And if you happen to use the block editor or the Gutenberg editor, as it's sometimes called, you already know that it offers a lot of flexibility and customization options. Basically, if there's a page layout that you're trying to create on your site, there's a block that can help you do that. And the block editor is very much, it's very much like Legos, but for page layout. It'll let you take text and images and kind of move them together along with embeds, galleries, all kinds of things. There's literally hundreds of blocks to choose from. So it's quite extensive. So if you're familiar with that, then full site editing basically expands on that concept by using the same block model for the creation of themes as well. So no longer would you be limited to just creating page layouts that are in the central part of your theme, kind of in that middle page area, but doesn't affect the other parts of your theme. Instead, this system gives you access to the entire theme. So you would have the ability to edit your header, your footer, sidebars if your theme happens to come with sidebars. It would even allow you to reach in and edit certain templates on your site. So you could create a custom 404 page, for example, or create a custom look for your blog posts. So they look a little different than they do from standard. So there's quite a bit of flexibility here. The only other thing that you need to be aware of here is that full site editing is tied to the type of theme you are using. So if you enable it, you need what's called a block theme or a full site editing theme on your site. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about what a full site editing theme is. They're themes, as you would guess, that are constructed entirely from blocks. And I know that sounds very obvious, but on the other hand, it's also really quite revolutionary because it no longer means that you're limited to a handful of theme settings. And that's because if you're familiar with the block editor, you know that individual blocks, each one of them has a tremendous range of options. So because everything is a block, with a full site editing theme, the design of your site is really no longer set in stone. You're no longer limited to just a small number of options and checkboxes and things that the theme author has built in for you. But instead, really, you can look at your theme as the starting point to create any site or any look that you want. This also means that with full site editing, you can create a custom design for your website without a single line of code and no need for a developer. It really is just point and click simple. And while the interface does take a little bit of learning and there's a bit of a learning curve to it, you need no code at all to work with it. So it's definitely within your ability to create custom sites using this tool. And the other thing I need to point out once again is that themes that are created to be used with the full site editor, full site editing themes as we call them, they're coded in a very specific way. They're coded to work with the full site editing tool. And so that doesn't really apply to any classic themes or legacy themes, basically themes that were created, say, 2021 and prior. Those themes were created using the editing tools that WordPress had at that time. So it's very likely that they won't work with full site editing. I would like to put a little pin in that for a second to say that that's where things stand right now. I believe that it's possible that someone down the road might create a plugin that would allow classic themes to use some full site editing functionality. It's hard to say. I haven't seen anything like that yet. The other thing that I have seen that's I think is really cool is that for some of the more popular themes that are out there, those designers are now redesigning them as full site editing themes. So they look the same, they feel the same, they have the same starting point, but they use the full site editing tools that were launched recently with WordPress 5.9. But as it stands right now, there really isn't a way to change a classic theme into a full site editing theme. Oh, I see actually someone mentioned here in the chat, does this mean the 2021 theme is not included? Actually, and I'm sorry, you caught me there. It is, although it was created in 2021 as the default theme for WordPress, that theme was created with full site editing in mind before it had launched. And there's a handful of themes that are like that. So it's not a hard and fast rule that it's every theme before 2021. But generally speaking, if you don't see the options that you see here for the site editor, which we're going to go into soon, then you probably have a classic or legacy theme. So let's talk about how we enable full site editing on our sites. If you are hosted with us with WordPress.com and you're on our managed service, then you can start a new site using our site setup flow. And that new site that you create is automatically enabled for full site editing. And in the site creation process, where you pick your theme and your domain name and other details, all the themes that you're presented there are block themes. They are full site editing themes. And so by default, a new site that's created on WordPress.com is ready to go. And because on WordPress.com, you can have as many sites as you wish under your account, it's really easy to just go and start a new site and then experiment with FSE without affecting your main site at all. And also, if you did want to change your existing site, it is possible, but you do have to select what's called a block theme or a full site editing theme. So let me show you what that looks like. When you're inside of the WordPress dashboard, and you click under appearance and then themes, you generally see this view. And I should clarify, this is just a screenshot. We do have live content, but this is a screenshot. And in the search bar here at the top, you just need to type in full site editing. In fact, you don't even need to type in the whole word. You probably just type in the word full and it'll autofill for you and point out that option to you. And when you select that option, every theme that you see presented below is a full site editing theme and does work with the site editor. So if you switch to any one of these themes, that would enable full site editing on your site. So like I said, on WordPress.com, it's really simple to start a new site. It's a great way to get some experience with FSE. And also, for those of you that are self-hosted and you have a site with another provider like Bluehost or GoDaddy or HostGator or any of the others that are out there, the process is just a tiny bit different. Because they're not managed platforms and WordPress is not updated for you by default, you'll want to make sure that you're on WordPress 5.9, which is the most recent version of WordPress as we speak, and is the one that you want because it's what includes the full site editing tools. Those aren't available if you happen to have a older version of WordPress, so you do need to update. And then once you've updated to WordPress 5.9, the process is really very similar. You can create a new site, and this varies by host, so you'll probably need to contact your hosting provider, make sure you have the option to add new sites to your account and what they recommend for that process. But you can create a new site and install a block theme, and you have full site editing. And the same is true of an existing site as well. You can take your existing site and you can just change the theme. And let me show you what that looks like. This is from the WordPress.org site, which is the more, what do I want to say, the more DIY-oriented version of the WordPress platform, not the managed version that we have on WordPress.com. But on WordPress.org, if you go to themes, and then you click on this feature filter that you see here, it'll have a list of checkboxes you can check, and one of those checkboxes is for full site editing. Once you select that, then all of the options you see below, all of those themes are enabled for full site editing as well. Dan is calling me out here on the chat here that the current version is 5.9.3, and you're absolutely correct, because there's been a few point releases to deal with small issues and refinements along the way. Also, keep your eyes peeled because WordPress 6.0 is going to be coming out soon. I believe it's scheduled for May 24th, although that can always change a little bit depending on the development team and their progress with that version. That brings up a really good point, which is that full site editing is a platform that's always evolving, just like WordPress is always evolving. So version 6.2 is going to be adding some different features, some new refinements to the full site editing experience. So what I'm going to show you now is going to be very much just where we're at right now with full site editing, but it's a platform that's going to grow and become more powerful over time. Anyway, back to the presentation. There is a third way to experiment with full site editing, and that's what we're going to focus on here for this webinar, and that is to create a new site and then import your content from an existing site into that new site. I really like this way because it gives you the best of both worlds. It allows your existing site to stay online, so anyone that visits it is not going to see that is under construction or anything like that. The other thing that I think is really great about it is that you can get a site set up this way, and if you have a custom domain on your main site, you can set up a site in full site editing completely in private by doing this. And because you've imported in your content, you don't have to start from scratch. You're actually starting with what you have on your existing site. And then if you like what you see, what you can do is just transfer the domain from your existing site to your new site, and that launches that site, basically replacing the new site, or replacing the old site with the new site. So it's a really great way to go, and that's what I'm going to show you today. And for that, I've got a little pre-recorded demo that we're going to go through, and then I'm going to catch you on the other side. This is Have Camera Will Travel, my long-running photo blog, which I set up some time ago with a classic theme. And it was a great look at the time, but I'd like to update it and customize it, which is just not really possible with this theme. For example, I'd like to be able to resize the logo and maybe tweak the title font. I'd also just like a wider homepage overall, maybe not even have this sidebar here anymore. And that would allow me to show the featured images for my blog posts a little bit larger and really show off the photography better. I'd also like to have a section up here at the top which would allow me to feature a blog post, maybe my most recent blog post, just so visitors to my site can see my first blog post really large and really catch their eye. So to do that, first what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the My Sites tab at the upper left. And here under Tools in my sidebar, I'm going to go to Export. And I'm just going to choose the Export All option. I'm going to give this a few minutes to run. And then when the export is successful, you can see we get this message here at the top. I'm going to go ahead and download this to my computer right now. Once we have that downloaded, I'm going to go up here to the left and I'm going to switch to my All Sites view. And I'm going to click on the link to add a new site. And for what we're doing here, I'm just going to go ahead and choose a free domain name for now. I do have the option down the road to get a custom domain. So for now, this is good just so we can experiment. So let's choose that. And I do have the option to add a custom domain or e-commerce or a few other options now. But I'm just going to go ahead and skip and just start with a really simple site, and I can add those later. And then now it's also time to choose a design, and we have quite a few themes here, and they're all for full site editing. So any one of these you pick will load the full site editor by default. So I'm going to choose this one, which I like sort of the open feel of it, and it already displays the images really well. It's a little bit more minimal than I'm looking for, but I think it's going to be a good starting point. Once the site is ready, we're dropped into the site editor for our site, where if we wish, we can actually begin customizing things. And you can see that it looks an awful lot like the demo for the theme that we were looking at. And it actually looks like we're on the live site, but as I move around and sort of hover my cursor over things, you can see that everything here I can interact with, including in the header. I have the option to interact with this area here where we might add a logo, or this area over here where we can add a navigation menu, for example. And that's when you can see that everything here in the site editor view is actually made from blocks. Okay, let's break in here for a second. I want to take a moment to sort of explain a little bit about the interface and about how it works before we get into the rest of the demo here. Let me, make sure I'm on the slide. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. How do you make a website out of blocks? We're going to start really simple with just some conceptual. This is not the actual view of the full site editing interface. We're just going to talk a little bit about concepts here. And the good news is that, don't worry, there's not going to be a quiz on this. We'll actually go through it later in our demo, so you'll see it in action. But to start out with building your site with blocks, let's first start with a blank template. This is a page from our website, but as you can see, it has no structure right now. It's just an empty blank page. If I was a web designer building a site from scratch, this is what I would be starting with, basically. So to start things off, let's add a block to the top of our page. And inside that block, let's add some more blocks for your logo and for your site title and for your site navigation as well. On a block theme, we call this group of blocks within blocks the header template part. It quite literally is a part of the page template that makes up the header. And so keeping them bundled together like this, it saves us the trouble of having to build a header from scratch each time we want to create a new page template. There's basically this thing called a header template part that we can pull off the shelf, we can plop into the template, and that's helped us build that part for us. So it's basically, like I said, just a collection of blocks you can use over and over again. So let's keep going. Let's add another set of blocks to our template down in the bottom. And this block, on a block theme, this will be called the footer template part. We have it really simple here. It's just sort of an area that's a different color and maybe a little bit of a footer credit, like a copyright notice or something like that. But you can see that even without adding anything to the middle, we already have the makings of a good website template with just two template parts, the header template part and the footer template part. So let's go ahead and let's keep going a little bit further. So for example, if I wanted to create a template for displaying my blog posts, I would add something in the middle to display the actual feed of blog posts. On WordPress and in full site editing, this is called the query loop block. It's kind of a technical name, so I'll explain it. And a good way to think of it is a query is a question and a loop is the answer. And so in this case, I've added this block into my template that's asking WordPress a question. Can you show me all the blog posts you've got? And WordPress replies with a loop or a feed of all the blog posts, starting with the newest at the top, older ones down below. On a block theme, probably this template is already going to be set up for you. It's a very standard. It's called the index template. It's not called the blog template, but it's called the index template because it displays a feed of index posts or an index of blog posts, let's say. So that's an example of one template that's created completely out of blocks. You could also use the same starting point, the same header part and the footer part with different stuff in the middle to create a new page template. On your WordPress site, there already is something called a page template, so you don't have to create this, but this is how it would be created. In the middle, there would be this area here for a title and some text and some images, but the header and the footer are pretty much the same. And if I was to create a new template, I wouldn't need to rebuild those each one at a time. I would actually be able to use the header template part, pop it in there, the footer template part, put it in there, and then whatever's in the middle is the part that's going to be unique to that page. So in this case, it's a page that's displaying text images. And in case you're curious, this is in you're creating a new page in WordPress, you know that it starts out as a blank page until you add your text or your images to it. And so this area in the middle of the page template is actually usually blank, and it's filled with the stuff that you add inside of the page editor for that page. So if this was a contact page, for example, it might have a contact form and an address to your business or something like that. If it was a 404 page, it would have, you know, a little something different. Maybe it would have like a, oops, we can't find what you're looking for here, that sort of thing. Let's go a little bit further and let's talk about a different template that you might have. So a lot of themes, but not all themes, would include something called a homepage template. And it's a special template, of course. It's used only in one place. It's used only on your homepage. And this template has like maybe a call to action at the top, a little area where if you're a business, you might want to promote one of your more popular services or offerings with some information and a link to find out more. And then below that, maybe a modified feed of blog posts, a modified query loop that just shows a small feed of maybe your 3 most recent blog posts. Again, looking completely different than the usual blog feed you see on the index template. And in each of these examples, we don't have to create the template from scratch every time. As I mentioned, these are pretty much created for you anyway, so I just want to explain how they're built. But as a web designer, if I was to build these, I wouldn't build the footer all the way from scratch each time, nor would I rebuild the header from scratch. I would just use those template parts, put them in there, and then change the part in the middle to be what I want that template to look like. And this is how template parts, these little bundles of blocks within blocks, form the foundation for all the templates that are included in a block theme. We just presented a few examples, but you could use this same concept to build a custom 404 page template or a special template to display search results on your site. So when someone searches for something, it displays a list of search results. Most themes come with these built in by default already. So actually, if you were to do anything with them, you would probably go in and modify them. But let's review quickly. Template parts are groups of blocks that you can use over and over again. And some template parts, like the header template part and the footer template part, those are used on every page of the site, almost always. This is the case with themes. On the other hand, some template parts may only get used once or twice in specific parts of your site on specific templates, like the homepage template, for example, which has a custom blog feed that looks different from all the other blog feeds on the site because it only appears on that template. And although you might not have thought of it before, you can now see how any page template that you have on your site really just starts out as a collection of template parts. And then you tweak it from there to make each page a little different to show the content you want to show. Okay, so time for a pop quiz. And I did say that there was gonna be no quiz here, but I lied a little bit. But don't stress, because we're not gonna grade this quiz at all. But I do wanna test your knowledge a little bit. So let's ask ourselves the question, when do we wanna edit a template part? Not the full template, but just one of those template parts, like the header template part or the footer template part. You would wanna do that when you want your change to appear site-wide. I put a little asterisk in there to clarify that when you edit a template part, it may not really affect every template on the site, but it will affect every template that uses that part. Let's use an example here. So we have, again, these are our basic templates that we were going over earlier. But let's say, for example, I wanted to change my logo a little bit and maybe change my site title and a few other things. And what I'd like to do is I would like to just edit that in one place and then have that change picked up everywhere. So in order to do that, I would actually go into the site editing tool and I would find the header template part and I would edit that directly. And then when I edit that, that change is going to be reflected across all of the templates that use that header template part. So again, I can just go to one place to edit that. I don't have to go to each template, open it up, edit the logo and the site title in each one and save and then move on to the next one. It saves a lot of work because I can just go in and I can edit just the header part itself. And because that part is used across many different templates, that change is reflected automatically on every template that uses that header template part. So next question, when do I want to edit the template itself? We've talked about how if we want to edit the header, we can do that in a special place called the header template part. And we can have that change reflected across the site. But when would you want to edit just the template itself? And you would want to do that when you want to make a change that appears on that template only and not on other templates. So to use our example again, let's say I wanted to go over here to my homepage and I want to edit the appearance of it so that the header is actually larger and commands a bit more attention. I don't want to edit the other headers on the site. I like these ones. I think they look just fine. But I just want to edit the header on the homepage only. So to do that, what I would do is I'd load the actual homepage template, the full template, the thing that shows all of the parts, and then I would make changes directly in that template. And when I save those changes would appear only on that template. It would not be a change that would be reflected across all the other headers on the site. It would just be for this one that we edited because we went to the homepage template specifically and we edited just the header in the homepage template. I know that this is a lot of concept and it's probably just a little bit confusing at this stage. The good news is we're going to go back to our demo and we're going to actually walk through this exact same thing. We're going to modify our headers on our demo site so you can see how this works in action. So let's go ahead and get back to editing our site. I'm going to do another pre-recorded demo and then on the other side we're going to talk about it. Back here on our new site, you can see we are in the site editor where we can work with blocks directly. Since I'm already considering updating an existing site, instead of working with the demo content pre-installed here, I'm going to go ahead and import the contents from my other site. So to do that, I'm going to leave the site customizer and go back to my dashboard. And then similar to what I did in the other site, I'm going to go back to Tools in my sidebar, and this time I'm going to click on the Import option. I'm going to choose WordPress to import from. And you could enter the URL of your site, but since I've already downloaded my export file, I can just go ahead and upload it to import. So let's go ahead and do that. Here's my file on my computer, and since I have both windows open, I can just drag and drop, and that starts the upload process for my import. I just need to resolve a few permissions issues, and then I can go ahead and start my import. And after you give this a little bit of time to run, it depends on the size of the export file you created on your other site, But once we're finished here, we'll have all of our contents loaded on our site. Okay, and now our import is complete. From here, I'm going to go into my post section of my dashboard. And you can see I've got a couple sample posts here from the theme when we started. So I'm just going to go ahead and move those to the trash quickly, just so we're working with the blog posts from the other site. And now that we're done, let's go back to the site editor, which is here under the Appearance tab in the sidebar. And once the site editor loads, you can see that we're back on our site again with our new theme, only this time you can see that it is now with our content in place. And this is the nice thing about moving content between sites. We have all of our same content here, nothing about that has changed, but we now have it on a new theme, and we now have a starting point we can customize from. Before we get started, I want to show you a few more things about the full site editing interface. First, here in the upper left is the list view. This opens a sidebar that shows you all the blocks that are in use in this template. List view is really helpful for navigating and understanding the block structure of the template. And from here, you can also easily click on blocks to select them, as well as clicking on them within the site editor directly. It can also help to collapse these sections down so your view is a little less cluttered. Here you can see that our template uses a familiar structure. It has a header template part at the top, a query loop block that is creating the blog feed for this page, and a footer template part at the bottom of the page with our website credit. Another thing I want to point out on the right is this button that reveals the settings sidebar. If you click on blocks in the editor view, you can see that each block has a floating toolbar with block settings. In addition to that, most blocks also have settings here in the sidebar as well. And you can see as I click on each block to the right, we have even more settings to control. Also here on the right is the Styles button, which reveals a sidebar that has some site-wide design settings. It allows us to control things like the typography on our site. I actually really like the typography for this theme by default, so I'm going to leave these alone. But it also lets you do things like change the color settings, and I would like to change that. I would actually like to set a gray background instead of the cream color this theme comes with. This looks a little dark, so I think what I'm going to do is click on the swatch here and then lighten it up just a little bit. I think that's perfect. I also want to point out here at the top that you can see the name of the template we're working on. This is the index template, which displays an index or feed of blog posts from our site. Because our site is a photography blog, the index template is the default template for our homepage. Okay, now that we've covered more about the interface, let's get to work modifying our site. The first thing I wanted to do was make some changes to the header, and it would be really tempting to make the changes here in the index template, but if we do that, it'll only make the changes here, which would show on our homepage, but the other headers on the site wouldn't be changed. So first let's save our changes so far. When you save, you can see a checklist of all the changes you've made here to this template. In this case, we've just made one change, so we'll go ahead and confirm that. Now that the changes are saved, let's click on the site icon in the upper left, which shows the other sections of the editor. In this case, we want to go to Template Parts, and then locate the header template part for this theme. You can see as well this theme comes with several other template parts, such as the footer, and even a few alternate headers that we could use if we wanted to. In this case, we'll just stick with editing the header template part itself. And now that it's loaded, let's upload a logo to the header. I have one here that I've added to my media library, so I'll just click to insert it into the header. This is a little small, so I'm going to drag the size to make it a bit bigger. And also I know this block has a few extra settings, so I'm going to reveal those in the sidebar, and I'm going to choose the rounded option. I think that looks pretty good. Also, I want to make sure that we add our site tagline because it wasn't captured during the site setup process. And then the last change we want to make here is we want to make sure to set up the navigation menu. Because I imported content from another site, I can click to select a menu, and under classic menus I can see the one that I set up before when my site was using a classic theme. And now our header looks complete. I'm going to go ahead and save this template part. You can see a list of the changes that we made. We could deselect a few of these if we wanted to. For example, we could just save the change to the tagline but uncheck the change to the logo. But we're going to save it as is. And once the save is confirmed, let's go back again to our site icon and expand that so we can see the other parts of the site editor again. From here, we're going to go back to templates. And what we want to do is we want to come back to editing the index template, which, as I mentioned, is the home page for our blog. But before I do that, I wanted to point out that you can see there's a lot of other templates here as well. We have a template for pages. This is very similar to the one that I demonstrated earlier. We also have a few others for archives and for things like 404 pages. Even this one here, which dictates how single posts look. You can also see here that on this one, off camera, I've edited this one, so you can see it's been customized. It has this little blue dot next to it. And if you click on this kebab menu here, you can see that you have the option to clear customizations. So it's good to know that if you're ever customizing a template and you really just want to return to the way it was by default, you can come here into the template view and you can do that. We're going to go ahead and click on the index page and load it in the site editor. Right away you can see that the header changes that we made have been picked up here in the index template. As I mentioned, because we edited the header template part, that has the effect of editing that part for all the templates that use it. Because we used this part on the index page, the edits we made just to that part are picked up here, as well as on other templates that use this part. This header has a nice minimal look that doesn't take up much space, but I'd like for my home page specifically to have a unique header that commands a bit more attention than this. So to do that, I'm going to click on the header template part, and you can see we have this option here in the toolbar to replace it. If I click this, you can see it loads several different header options for us. These are the ones we saw listed before on the template part page. I happen to like this centered header that comes with the theme, so let's pick that. And just like with our other header, we're going to take this one and we're going to make it a rounded logo. I would also like to change the site title. I think it looks better when it's set in an italic font. The same is true of the tagline, so let's change that one as well. We're also going to click on our navigation menu, and we're going to select a menu, again selecting the same primary menu that we brought over from our other theme. Moving on from here, I'm going to expand list view again, and I'm going to click on the query loop block that is setting up the feed of blog posts on this template. What I'd like to do is I'd like to switch to a grid view, which is what my other site had, but you can see here that it's just a little too cramped, so let's change that in the settings on the right. The first thing I want to do is I want to cut down on the number of columns, so let's just display 2 columns. And this is already looking a little bit better, but you can see that the width is still really constrained here quite a bit. The reason for this is that the theme that we started with just had a single column of posts, and so by design the original column was narrow to fit that content. We're going to turn that off by telling that we don't want to inherit this default layout from the theme anymore. And you can see already that this has expanded quite a bit of the view here. In fact, maybe it's made it a little bit too wide, so we're going to constrain the width, but we're just going to set it to 1,000 pixels this time. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's also switch off the defaults for the other settings on this block so we can customize it more freely. The first thing I'd like to do is cut down on the number of posts that are displaying here. This seems like a lot. So let's click in the settings for this block, and let's change the number of items displayed on the page from 10 to 4. That looks pretty good. You can see this change is reflected right away. Another thing I'd like to do here is I'd like to change the titles here and make them just a little bit smaller. They just seem too big for me overall, so let's try a preset. This one seems a bit too small. Let's go ahead and set a custom one instead. Let's try 40 pixels. Still a little bit too large, 35. That seems about right. I like that it's making the titles small enough that for the most part they fit in a single line. While we're here, let's also make a few more changes. There's a read more link here, and I'd like to customize that to say continue reading. And let's also make it bold so that it stands out a little bit. I also want to simplify things a little bit in the post meta, so the first thing I'd like to do is just remove the author line. I'm the only author on this site, so I don't think I really need to show that. Also, we have some post terms here, or tags, and I feel like these clutter it up a bit too, so let's go ahead and delete those as well. Okay, this blog feed is looking good. One more change I'd like to make here is to add a section above this post list so that I can feature my most recent blog post at full width. To do that, I'm going to click on the query loop block in the list view again, and in the floating menu I'm going to choose the option to insert a new block before this one. On the right, I'm going to click the plus icon, and I'm going to look for another query loop block. When you first add the block, you can see that it fills out with your blog post right away. And also we're presented with the option to try a few different layouts. This one has a nice large image. Let's see if there's others. That seems good, but I really like the large image, so let's go ahead and start with that. Immediately I can see that we're loading more blog posts than I want, so let's go back up to the settings for this block and let's change the number of posts that are shown from 3 to 1. And then when we scroll down, we can see that this section is just sitting above our other feed of blog posts. While I'm here, I'm going to click on the query loop again, and I'm going to constrain the width of this block similar to the one below it, just so that they line up a little bit better. And you can see that they keep that same width all the way through. Another change I want to make here, I'd like to take this post title and I'd like to move it below the image. So to do that, I'm going to click on the controls here and I'm just going to move it down one. And you can see now that it's just below the image instead of above it where it was. Also, I'd like to make this one a little bit bigger. Let's try for a custom size again. I'm going to try 50 pixels. Actually, I think it looks a little better here at 60 pixels. Another change I'm going to make here is I'm going to change the read more link to say continue reading, and I'm also going to bold it to carry the same theme that I'm doing in the posts below. Since this is my most recent post, I don't think I need to show the date for this particular one, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that as well. And you can see this has cleaned up the view quite a bit. One thing I'm noticing is that these sections seem too close together. So I think it would be a good idea to click on the query loop, and again we're going to add another block above it, and this time we're going to add a spacer block. I'm going to go ahead and search for that. And let's make it just a little bit taller to create a bit more separation. I'm going to click out of there so we can see it a little bit better. That looks pretty good. One last thing, I can see that the blog post is repeated twice. We show the first one at the top and then it shows up again in the feed. One nice thing about the query loop is we can prevent this. And to do that, let's click on it in the sidebar. And then here in the settings, you can see we have this option called offset. And I'm going to change this from 0 to 1. And to explain what this does, it basically tells the block, I want you to show a feed of all my blog posts, but before you show that, just skip the first one and show every post after that. And that's exactly what it's done here. You can see that the duplicate post is removed, so it's just shown above now. And when we publish a new blog post, it'll be the one that shows up here at the top, and then it'll kick that one down below to this feed of blog posts we have below it. I'm feeling pretty good about this layout, but before I save my changes, I'm going to preview quickly. And this allows me to see how the design is going to look when it's on a tablet and on a smartphone. And you can see on a smartphone it actually scales really nicely. Everything goes back to a single column view. A two-column view here would just feel too crowded. So let's go ahead and save this template. You can see we've made a few changes here, and that's fine. We're going to confirm those and save. Now let's take a look at our site. Okay, let's go ahead and get back to our site here, so we can take a look at it. First of all, apologies if anyone's hearing a little background noise. The fans on my laptop are just going crazy right now. So apparently, screen sharing a webinar to 700-ish people is just a bit much for my computer. So sorry about that. So anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at our sites. Let's start off here with the site that we created. So this is the live site that was created in the demo. And as you can see here, it looks essentially identical. There really is no change except for the fact that when I move my cursor over things, I'm not really seeing any of the controls I'm used to seeing. One other thing that I think is really cool to point out, and I made a point of this when we were talking about how to edit header template parts, for example, is you'll recall we created a special header just for our index page, which is a homepage on a blog kind of oriented site. But if we click on other pages on our site, like our About page, you can see that we have that smaller, more minimal header that we edited in the first step. That's true for the About page, the Contact page, and really any other page on the site, because they're all using the same header template part. But we opened up the index template specifically in the site editor, and we edited just this header as we were editing the rest of the page. And that's why this header shows up only on the home page and not on any other page of the site. Let's also go ahead and compare this to the site we started with. This, as you'll recall, is the old site, if you will, the old site that I have here. And as I mentioned, I was never really a fan of this sidebar. I felt like it took some space away from my images. So I intentionally picked a theme that didn't have a sidebar to start with. And then from there, I went through customizing it with full site editing to arrive at something that looks really quite a bit different. And although the content is the same, it's the same blog post, the same images, the same everything else, it really couldn't be more different. And also the really cool thing is that what we've done in the time of this demo, which is about 15 minutes of me working on it while recording myself, we've created a completely custom looking site. And nowhere is this more evident than if we compare our site that we've created to the theme we started with. So this is the geologist theme that we first used. This is the one we uploaded our content, or imported our content into. And you can see that it really is quite different. It has a very narrow kind of single column layout. I was drawn to this theme because I liked the size of the images and I liked the typography, and I just felt like it had kind of a nice, fresh, kind of open feel. It's a little bit different than the site that I was starting with or coming from. But from this, really, with just a little bit of time and effort, I've managed to arrive at a completely custom site that I've built myself. It doesn't look like anyone else's. And although I've started with a theme as my starting point, so you could say I've started with a template, with just a little bit of effort, I've really managed to create something that's completely custom and completely unique to myself. So again, full site editing is, as I say, it's a new thing. We show it as beta inside the WordPress dashboard, WordPress.com dashboard, but it is in fact released. It is version 1. And so this is something that we expect is going to grow and develop over time as new features and new capabilities are added to the full site editor. But until then, you can see that just with what's here now, it's really amazing the possibilities that full site editing opens up in terms of being able to create your own site. And we've really just scratched the surface. Even just with the tools we have here now, we could keep going even deeper and deeper into customizing our site, just using the full site editing tools that we have now. So I know this presentation was a lot of new info to take in, but I really hope that you've been inspired to give full site editing a try. So thank you very much for your attention. Before we go on here, I want to do just a little bit more housekeeping. I want to point out that we do have other webinars available at WordPress.com/webinars. We have several webinars covering getting started with blogging, getting started with the site using our classic tools, and also how to start a site using, or how to set up WooCommerce on a site. So if you would like a site that has full e-commerce with integrated shopping cart, account pages, stock and inventory controls, you would use WooCommerce for that, which is a plugin you can install on your site. And we do have a webinar that walks through that as well. I'd also like to point out that we have online courses available. These are self-guided courses that are available at WPcourses.com. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and just let me see here. I'm gonna switch over to it right now, actually. So I just want to point out, these are all free courses that are available to you to sign up for. And we have courses on blogging, podcasting, and this really popular one we just launched, which is on search engine optimization. So if this webinar moves just a little fast for you, or it doesn't quite go deep enough and you'd like to learn a bit more about WordPress, these self-guided courses are a really great way to start. And as I mentioned, they're totally free. So you can just sign up, create an account, and then enjoy the learning. Also, a really cool thing about these is that you're going to be taking the course with other people at the same time. And we do have community features, so you're able to help each other, walk each other through your process of getting used to WordPress. And we do have staff that also helps along the way too. So it's not just a bunch of people taking the course, but we actually have happiness engineers from WordPress.com that are dropping in to also offer assistance as well. So I think without further ado, let's go ahead and let's get to the Q&A. my assistants have been busy furiously typing answers to these questions, and they're coming in so fast that we couldn't possibly get to them all. So firstly, I want to thank you all for your enthusiasm. We're not going to be able to get to every question here. I'm only going to be able to get to a few of them myself that are live. But you're always welcome to attend our future webinars. The Q&A is different every time. And if you're hosted with us at WordPress.com and you have a specific question about your site, you're more than welcome to reach out at WordPress.com/help. We have in-house support that's available for you to help you with any questions you have with your site. Let's go ahead and get to our first question here, and I'm going to switch over to my demo site just in case I have anything here I want to demonstrate. But I may not actually use this interface, so apologies if it doesn't change at all. First, I'm going to take Andy's question. Certain plugins don't use full site editing, and if we create headers and footers in the theme using full site editing, it will default to the default header footer. Well, that's really frustrating. I'm sorry. Will there be some backwards compatibility with full site editing for plugins like this, or will it be on the side of the plugin to implement that? I'm going to guess that by your question, you probably are self-hosted with another provider of WordPress sites. On WordPress, upload themes and plugins, by the way, but that's with our Pro plan, which is an upgrade, so it's not something we can do with free sites, but does allow you to upload any plugin or theme for WordPress in the exact same fashion here. To answer your question, and I think I maybe tipped my hat to this a little bit earlier when I mentioned that the full site editor is version 1.0. I suspect that probably what's going on here is that your theme might be full site editing compatible, but plugins you have are not. And for that, actually, what I would do is I would reach out to the author of your plugin itself. They probably have a support channel or a forum that they offer for people who have questions specific to that plugin, and ask them about it. Tell them about the trouble you're having. See if they have a workaround that's available for you to use right now. And also, as I mentioned, because this is version 1, I think there's still a lot of places that in the WordPress community that are still trying to catch up to this, because although the development has been going on for several years, and it's been something that anyone who has interest in it could check in on and understand where this is going. It's taken to this point where it's now launched and available to everyone before a lot of people are finally getting it and understanding it better. Now that you can kind of put your hands around it and sort of play with it and experiment with it, it becomes much more real. And so I suspect it's the case that plugins in general will get much better at using full site editing. And also there will be more themes available for full site editing. And because this is the default editor for Word, we expect that to just grow more and more over time. So I would say that if you're having a little trouble with full site editing right now, it might be just a little bit too early for your situation, and that's fine. But if you are having trouble with just specific plugins, I'd reach out to the plugin author right away and just let them know, hey, I keep trying to use your plugin and I'm using full site editing and things are breaking, and see if they can help. Because it's not something that would normally be addressed within WordPress. I'll give you an analogy. You have a smartphone in your pocket. You're probably familiar that Apple or Android or whoever creates a smartphone, and they create a system that allows you to put apps on it. And the platform, the phone itself, is an open platform, and other people develop for it and create apps that work on it. And this is exactly the same way with plugins on WordPress sites. WordPress is an open, stable platform that basically gives developers a guide for how to write plugins and create plugins that work with WordPress. But it can be the case that some plugins, they're maybe not quite written the right way, or in this case, likely an update of some kind needs to happen. So that would be with the plugin and not with WordPress directly, just to clarify that relationship. I hope that answers your question. It probably created a bunch of new questions. So that's perfectly okay. But if I didn't quite get to the content of your question, and you are hosted with WordPress.com and I'm not aware of it, feel free to reach out at WordPress.com/help and we'll take a look at your site. Linda asks, is there a fee for Jetpack? There is not. Jetpack itself is absolutely free. The plugin itself is available in the WordPress.org plugin repo. And if you go to your site and go to the plugins tab in your dashboard, and you just search for Jetpack, you'll find it and you can click on it and you can install it on your site. Jetpack does have some add-ons that are features that are for pay. Additional security features like backups that are real time and that you have access to, or security scans, excuse me, that look for malware, or anti-spam blocking tools that'll prevent spam comments and things like that. Or if you have a contact form, will prevent spam contacts on your contact form. There's also options for boosting your site speed and for adding the ability to upload videos, some things like that. So there are some features that are not free on Jetpack, but most of the core features, and certainly everything I've shown you in this webinar, is part of the free plugin. So I hope that answers your question. Ray asks, can we set up posts to different pages? This is not exactly a full site editing question, although I think it would be interesting to try and do this in a full site editing way. But it's definitely something that's possible here. And I'll go ahead and show you here in my dashboard here. And I'm kind of peeking around my microphone, so apologies if I keep kind of looking off to the side here. But if you look under posts and you see you have categories, categories is how I would sort this out. So on WordPress, you can only have one blog. There's only one master blog feed that shows all of your blog posts. And this is great. This is great for search engines because Google can just go to your site, see all your posts. But if you want to divide that up and offer sort of different buckets of blog posts, things that are related to each other by topic, one way I like to do that is by using categories. And you can see here I've loaded the categories interface in my dashboard. And on my demo side, I have several categories that are already set up. You can see that I have the number of blog posts that I have for each category. When you add a category to your blog posts, WordPress by default automatically starts organizing these for you, which is really super cool. So if I wanted to, for example, see all of the posts I have under my classic camera classics category, excuse me, getting a little tongue tied here. I can go ahead and, oops, where do I see the view the page that, oh, I think what I might need to do here for this is I can't get to it from this interface, so apologies for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to view one of my blog posts here. View the post. And we see that we've listed it under photography and travel as our categories. And so if I click on photography as a category, you can see that there's already been a page. This is created by WordPress automatically. It creates a category page for you by default. And then it shows only the blog posts that are part of this category. In this case, I just have 3 blog posts here, so I wouldn't really expect to see a whole bunch more. It looks like I've got 4. I think the photo category is one where I have actually several blog posts, probably most of my blog posts actually. But you would use this to allow you to subdivide your blog into different topics of interest by category. And then from there, you could add those into your menu. So for example, if you wanted to have a part of your blog that's just about food or just about travel or something like that, you would add those up into your menu and people would click on them and they would just see all the blog posts from that category. And you as a creator of the website, it's super easy because you don't have to create any of these pages. You can just add categories to your blog posts and it happens automatically. I definitely recommend checking out our blogging webinar, which is at WordPress.com/webinars. Or we also have our free course at WPcourses.com. There's an intro to blogging course there as well. Both of those go over this in much more detail than I'd be able to do here in the Q&A, but it's absolutely possible. And it's something that many other blog owners do. Linda asks, I want to try FSC on our existing site, which is hosted by WordPress using our own website address. I'm nervous about going through all the work and then finding it difficult to change the temp website address to our actual website address once we like the whole new thing. Is that easy to do? Actually, it is much easier than you would think, and people really sweat and lose a lot of sleep over this. But I'll show you here on, let's go back to my 2 sites. So let me, sorry, I'm off screen here, kind of dragging something out of my view that's blocking my view here. I'm not doing a very good job of it, actually. Okay, here we go. So I have my old site that I started with, and it actually has a custom URL. It's called havecamarawilltravel.blog. This is my existing site, and then somewhere in the background at this whole different URL, I've set up a totally new site, as we've done here in the demo. The good news is that I don't actually have to do anything other than move my domain from one site to the other. And that'll basically launch the new site over the existing site. If you're hosted with us at WordPress.com, you can reach out to support and we'd walk you through this step by step. If you're with another hosting provider, I would reach out to them directly and ask them how they recommend moving a domain from one site to the other site. But really, that's all it is. It's as simple as that. As soon as you move your domain to the new site, it's as if the old site ceases to exist. It can't be accessed at that URL anymore. No one can go to it. It's basically gone. So what I like to do is I like to get my new site set up completely in private, make sure it's exactly the way I want it to look. And then the very last step, the last thing I would do is just grab that URL and then transfer it to the other site. And you're done. The site's launched. So I hope that answers your question. Again, I do recommend reaching out to your provider. If it's us, we'll be happy to walk you through it step by step. Okay, it looks like I'm here at the very top of the hour. I do want to answer this last question from Antonia. But before I do, I want to thank you all again for attending, anyone that's not able to stick around any further. I'm going to answer this last question, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave everything up here for about 5 minutes so that you can copy any information that you want before the session ends. So Antonia asks, what's the difference between WordPress.com and WordPress.org? This is a mystery for the ages, I will admit. So I'll explain it as a history lesson. Back before there was any WordPress, WordPress was created as software, and it was super simple. It was software that you could install on your web server and create a website for yourself. It's an application for creating websites, basically. That has grown today to what we call WordPress.org. This is the free open source version of the platform that's worked on by the community. It's not owned by any company or any organization. It's actually a community-driven project. And it's a piece of software that you can install on any web server. These days, popular hosts like GoDaddy and HostGator, they provide like a one-click installer to help you do that. But that's basically what's happening, is they're just downloading the software package and putting it on your host and installing it for you, and then you're off to the races, create your site. But it is a very DIY process. You have to be comfortable a little bit with managing the hosting aspects of it. You are required to do your own software updates, do your own security hardening. Because it's a free open source project, it doesn't really come with support the way that a paid product would. So there are forums at WordPress.com/support, or excuse me, WordPress.org/support. They do have forums that are available to help you with any questions you have. But those are community run as well. They're not owned by a company, as I said. So there's really no one there that's helping with that other than other people helping each other, essentially. WordPress.com is different, but only in a few key ways. So the thing that's the same about them is it's really, for the most part, the same WordPress. There isn't really a huge difference between the two. There are some differences in the details because we offer free sites on WordPress.com, which is impossible to do if you're with a web host. If you're with a web host, you have to pay for your hosting. And then, of course, the WordPress is free after that. But on WordPress.com, we offer completely free sites. Those are a little more simple, though. They don't have the full functionality of WordPress. We keep them simple so that they're easy for us to manage. And we offer them for free so anyone can try WordPress. But we are a managed provider. So what we do is we take care of the installation, the software updates, the security, backups, login protection, and we even provide support in-house through WordPress.com, where we help anyone who has a site on WordPress.com with whatever question they have. And then also, if you want to have the full functionality of WordPress, the ability to upload plugins, themes, that sort of thing, that's possible too. You just need to upgrade to the WordPress.com Pro plan. And then once you do that, you have the same capabilities as any other WordPress site. Essentially, the cost of the Pro plan is almost similar to the cost of hosting, basically, with another provider. But the cool thing about it is it's a managed service. So we still do your software backups. We still do your backups, which are accessible to you. So you don't need to call or ask anyone to get them for you. There's an interface where you can go load it up. And if you made a mistake with your site on a Tuesday, you can roll it back to Monday and it's magically fixed. We also do security scans to make sure there's no malware on your site. We do all the updates to make sure that your site is safe from hacking, because the biggest problem with WordPress sites getting hacked is generally because the software is not updated. It's very much the same as if you forget to update your Windows computer and it gets hacked. Generally, if you have the most recent version of Windows on your computer, then you have nothing to worry about from that standpoint. So same with WordPress. So we take care of all that for you. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get the full access to everything that WordPress does, the full power of WordPress, but on our managed platform where we take care of everything for you. And we provide things like live chat if you have a question about your site. So that's kind of a long explanation, but a short explanation because really they're very similar. The differences are just in the details. And if you're the kind of person that feels like you need help with your site, and you'd like to have a resource, people you can reach out to, I definitely recommend WordPress.com because we have in-house support. You might even get me helping you with your site, to be honest with you. So we do take a lot of care and attention to making sure that people who have sites on WordPress.com have their questions answered and everything's running happily and healthily. Okay, that's the end for questions. And I do believe that's also the end for our webinar. I'm, like I said, going to leave things on the screen for a little bit here, just so you can copy any information you'd like out of here. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my microphone and my camera, go get myself a glass of water. So thank you all again very much. I really appreciate having you here. I hope to see you on the next one, or possibly I'll also be helping you with your site. So I hope to see you there as well. All right, thank you again, everyone. Bye-bye.